you're my first candidate to do like an interview with. So you got the questionnaire.
Yes.
So let's talk right into the mic and then you can hear yourself.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I have the questionnaire.
Okay. So what do you think about the questions? Because you didn't submit it, but I'm really curious why you didn't submit it before we start talking.
Yeah. So what I really like about your questionnaire is that you are using it to help the citizens be informed. Like this is where this candidate stands. And there's a lot of complicated factors in each of those questions.
Yeah.
And I have my opinions right now, and I want to be sensitive to things that I might not be aware of with each one of those. And so for it being an official public, statement of where I stand on there, I just need to clarify a few more things.
Yeah, I hear you.
And so I wanted to have this discussion, get a sense of where you're coming from, and then submit that form.
Okay.
I want to be able to stand behind what I say if I'm going to write out something that's public, that is for people to say,
I love that,
hold this candidate accountable to these statements. That's why.
Dude, it's a big deal. Like, I think I had this epiphany yesterday, and there's 18 original candidates.
Right.
And I think at one point you realize, oh, I thought I was doing this, and then you get hit with this realization that it's a different job than what you thought it was going to be. And sometimes it happens really quickly because like the campaigning and stuff, it throws people off because that might not be something they've ever done before or ever really followed all that closely. Have you ever followed like campaigns and things like that before?
I actually have.
Okay.
I used to tell people that I'm a recovering political scientist.
Nice. Sweet,
Here
dude.
I am running for city council.
Dude, that's so, it's like an AA. It's AA for political science, like majors. So I was a political science major and Jeff Watkins was a political science major.
Okay.
And we're both real estate agents. And
here you are talking politics.
And here we are talking politics because honestly, religion and politics are my two favorite things to talk about. And if I can just have somebody else talk about it with me like this, I think other people like watching. But they don't always necessarily like to do it themselves, right? Which is why Tucker Carlson's popular and Candace Owens, and you have all these. And then on the left, you have, the Megan Foxes of the world, or I can't even remember where they all stand because they used to be left and then now they're right, or they used to be right and now they're left. Like the whole world's been tipped upside down in my mind over the last 10 years. Would you agree?
Yes, in general, I would. Yeah. There's this movement which is forcing people to get off the fence.
It's true.
There's no longer gray area, not like there used to be.
Interesting.
And people could hide behind certain values. They could pretend values and not have to answer them. But now, when it comes to social issues, everybody's being backed into a corner. Where do you stand?
Yeah,
there is no neutral ground anymore.
Yeah, you almost can't stand on the sidelines in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
But especially when you run for city office, you know what I mean? Especially when you jump into that. Yeah. So looking at those 7 questions, right? It was like housing affordability. I focused on housing affordability and what does that mean? And then I also talked about economic development. We talked about infrastructure. We talked about water. And then I think I got one other question in there. There's 7 of them, right? So you have all these different segments.
Projects that are
public safety, public safety,
and projects that are currently happening that I would be in favor of supporting.
Yeah. Exactly. And so you said let's step back one step and tell me who you are. Like if I had never met you before, which I don't really know anything about you, like tell me your brief synopsis of where you've been and how you got here.
Okay. So I'm Aros Mackey. I went to my undergrad.
There you go.
I'm
Perfect,
Aros
dude.
Mackey. My undergrad was at BYU, Idaho. That's where I was introduced to political science. My major was political science, public relations, and organizational communications.
Cool.
And then I ended up going on to a master's degree in intelligence.
Okay.
And I was going to be that political scientist in DC.
Yeah.
That was going to
Jack Ryan.
I was motivated by Jack Ryan, but I knew that at the same time, that's scripted and there's kind of a storyline.
But there's a lot of reality in there.
I was serious about helping our counter-human trafficking and counter-terrorism practitioners be more safe and more efficient legislatively, whether it meant doing whatever it took in my skill set to wipe out legislation and cut out bureaucracy so that they could be more efficient and more safe. And
Blake, this is right up your Blake's right up your alley, bro.
Yeah. Me and Aros have talked before. Yeah.
Yeah.
But while I was studying and diving into foreign terrorist organizations and counter human trafficking, I started seeing the gaps where nothing was happening and people were being abandoned and they needed rescued. And it was the families. It wasn't necessarily the victims of human trafficking that needed rescued. They definitely did, but people are looking at them trying to figure out how to help them. But the families didn't have anybody.
Yeah.
And the families you had moms and dads and grandpas and that are walking dark streets and alleys for cases that law enforcement couldn't get probable cause. And so I redirected, instead of continuing on in intelligence, which I was going to do a PhD in intelligence. I decided my life's work would be more effective if I dedicated my life to countering human trafficking. And I went into a criminal justice PhD program.
Okay.
And then I taught for a couple of years as a criminal justice professor. And then
Where'd you teach?
Down at Northwest Career College in Las Vegas.
Okay, cool.
And then in that time of my schooling, adaptive ops had naturally developed, and I just kind of put a name on what I was doing from business to my nonprofit work, pro bono type stuff. And that's what I do full time.
Yeah. Cool, man. Okay. And then, so do you have family? What married? Kids?
Yes. He took me under his wing and taught me a lot about Dixie and the patriotic pioneering spirit of Dixie. And in 2010, my wife and I both felt like we needed to come here and help preserve that patriotic and pioneering spirit of Dixie that was instilled in us by her grandfather.
Yeah.
And so it's been the greatest joy of my life to be raising my children in their heritage.
Yeah.
And we've taught them. They understand very well where they came from, the sacrifices, the faith that their family had, the patriotism, the hard work, the personal responsibility, the sacrifice.
Yeah. My
children are indoctrinated in who they are and where they came from.
Cool, man. I try not to indoctrinate my kids. I'm like trying to figure out, like, how do you not like mess your kid up in some kind of way? Because I think about,
if you don't, the adversary will.
I know. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. I hear a lot of times too, like rough childhoods make people, make people success in their own way. Like I have this like thing on success, right? It's like, it's built on hustle, execution, discipline, ambition, sacrifice, patience, failure, focus. Yet that can all be different for everyone.
Does that actually help you win in Monopoly?
Monopoly is a very good strategy game if you've played it 500 times like I have.
Yeah. So you can actually take each of those.
But no. So the idea would be this. So this is just an artistic rendering of just like a motivational thing. So it's an iconic is the brand. So they did it in the style of Monopoly, but it's defining success. Like what is the definition of success? And a lot of times when you have a really great childhood, you lose some of these things. Like you don't have hustle, right? You don't know what it's like to sacrifice because you just didn't get that opportunity as a kid, or that wasn't in my way of trying to be the best parent I could be.
Yeah.
I end up like not teaching my kid what it is to sacrifice something, right? Because I want them to never feel like they have to sacrifice anything. You know what I mean? So it's learning ways to do that. It's so hard for me, man. My oldest is 7, and you've probably had, how old are your kids now?
20.
Oh, you raised them.
19 and, oh wait, she just turned 20, and 15 and 12.
15 and 12. Yeah. You've almost done it, man. You're almost at the finish line.
Yeah. Now I need to say something.
Yeah.
So about you. So I was at a meeting recently, and you were there. Mm-hmm. You think different, and I'm watching, and I'm paying attention to the questions people are asking, how people are interacting to each other, and you definitely have more of a dynamic thought process. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, and I'm not saying that to butter you up or anything. I
wasn't sure it was a compliment yet.
It's a compliment.
Oh, thank you. I
Coming from
that.
me.
Yeah.
I take pride in my analytical thought process.
Yeah.
In my mind, that's where my living comes from, and my surviving in the type of work that I do. But I wouldn't discount your efforts toward your children. If you're giving them a high quality life, mm-hmm. they're watching you, they're learning from you. They're probably breaking down thought processes like you are. Mm-hmm. And so maybe they might not be successful in swinging a hammer
or a bat.
Yeah.
A baseball bat. I love, I coached the Little League too. And
well, they probably might be.
They might,
because of if anything, they'll at least, they'll have a love for it and be,
exactly.
And be coaching. I would say don't ever discredit the values you're pushing toward your children.
I do appreciate that. But it's also one of those things is, trying to humble yourself. Cause like as soon as you think you figured it out, I feel like that's when things start to go wrong. Like as soon as you feel like, oh man, I figured this whole thing out, I've mastered it. And then you're like, oh, I believe God teaches us like, nope, you haven't figured it out. He's like, it's going to always be the endless problem. Mm-hmm. I was funny because I was talking to somebody who I admire, a very bright individual who I would say thinks differently. Like you can really tell, like when you interact with them and see their track record of success and things like that. Him and I were just joking about that, right? Is like when we decide to create something, the second we have an idea, right? The idea becomes a thing when you start to work, when you start to do it, right? And every step after the thought creates a problem because you're fixing something. You're like the idea, and now I'm going to solve something. So then that solution is going to create finding another problem that will need another solution. And as you build these things, they just get more and more complicated, more problems to solve, right? More complicated solutions, right? Mm-hmm. And so we build up these structures. And in my mind, you look at the governmental structure to try to bring it back to like what we've been talking about. The governmental structure has gotten so bloated and so big, and we're starting to create solutions to problems that we wouldn't have had should we not have created this other thing way back here. And then when do we decide we're done with that, right? Like if from the way I understood history, the bureaucratic expansion of the federal government happened in the turn of the century. Woodrow Wilson was a primary driver of that. He expanded all these administrative bureaus to organize this population that had grown and this empire that they had created after, getting through. Really, the Industrial Revolution had just kicked off, right? And now we have all these people working, and there's all these jobs, and things need to be done. Slavery had ended, and now you have this huge workforce that you have to now organize and assemble into society. So we start creating these things, and now we're 100 years removed from that expansion of those departments. When do we just say stop? Because if not, it'll just keep going. It's going to go forever, and that's crazy to me.
You're exactly right. And when it comes to that bloated bureaucracy, the only way to fix that is to get people in there that are not interested in getting their name stamped on a piece of legislation or a new law. Look what I did. This is my thing. I want to be known for wiping out the most laws.
Yeah. Okay.
Or I want to get my peers, when I'm in public service, I want to get them to agree that if you want to create a new law, get your name on the books on a law, then you have to remove 2 first.
Remove 2 laws.
Yep. Well, find 2 laws of bureaucracy, cut them out. I'm not saying laws.
So in your criminal justice, like with your criminal justice background, let's talk about like, how are you going to take the criminal justice background that you have and apply it to the city council seat? Because I know that was something that you wanted a topic you wanted to dive into.
Yeah. Part of my inspiration toward doing this is I've done counter human trafficking work in over 20 major U.S. cities, helping families get reunited.
Okay.
The cities that were the most effective at helping me were cities that had city council members or a mayor that truly, genuinely cared about human trafficking in their area. If it's not on their minds, the reality is they're the bosses. They're the bosses of the law enforcement. They're the bosses of the prosecution, the DAs, even the public defenders.
Okay.
They're in control of that criminal procedure process. And I'll tell you, one of the worst human traffickers I ever confronted was right here in our area. I've confronted a lot of them throughout the world. One of the worst ones was right here. And I thought he was gone. I worked with Homeland Security, and they had gotten that guy taken care of. And I was in the rec center lifting weights a few years ago, and I come out, and there he is playing pool. He stands up straight, looks me in the eye. I look him in the eye, and I'm like, what the heck is this guy doing back in the area? I thought he was gone.
Yeah.
So our law enforcement, they're doing the best they can, but there's a criminal justice process that has to be respected, and it's respected through election processes. And when somebody is in there, they have certain constitutional powers and authorities that I think a lot of times is usurped in many ways, but we have to make sure those people who are going in there are people who are wise and are going to. Here's what happens in our society right now. If a bank is being robbed, the government steps in and shuts down our constitutional rights to enter that bank for our safety. The police are going to be like, don't go in there. You are not allowed to go in there. That's taking away our constitutional rights to go in.
Okay.
For our safety. It makes sense. It makes sense. It's reasonable.
Or is it more so that they're like, hey, you could go in there, but you risk your own life. And what they're also trying to do is keep the bank robber from leaving.
Oh, they'll.
Is it more about keeping the bank robber from leaving and catching the guy? Or is it more about, well, let this guy do what he's going to do and I'm going to keep everybody away?
You're going to compromise an investigation. If you go in there, we're not letting you in.
Oh, okay. So in addition to it is now we have an open investigation in a criminal act and we want to make sure that the area isn't contaminated. So is that really restricting our constitutional right?
You bet. For the purpose of law enforcement to do their just
But
work.
what constitutional right specifically, maybe I'm misunderstanding, are they infringing upon? Our right to walk somewhere?
Yeah, or enter
I don't think that's in the
business.
Constitution.
Our right of search and seizure. They are stopping you from being able to go where you want to go. That's Fourth Amendment.
Well, hold on. In just the scenario, though, like, and maybe that scenario isn't the best analogy to work with because if I'm a police officer and there's a robbery in progress, there's a crime in progress, and I am going to tape off the area for public safety, but also because there's an active crime going in, and the ability for a state to organize a power and authority like the police to execute its authority on behalf of public safety is one thing, depending on the scenario, right?
But
in the scenario that's happening right now,
that person's right to go in there.
Are you saying somebody?
Now, mind you, I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm saying this is
an example of them violating the right,
not violating, but stopping your right. Justly violating would be more violating would be more of an unjust way to stop that.
I got it. Okay, I'm tracking. Okay, fair enough.
We can move as we see fit in our country,
right?
Until the government says no, you can't.
Right, until they flex the actual physical power of doing it.
Right. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong what they're doing. That's what happens in that situation. When the situation is de-escalated and their crime scene is squared up, it's done. Now they lift that authority off and let people go again.
Okay.
That's the way that our government needs to protect us.
Okay. Got it.
When there's an immediate threat, then they will step in.
Okay.
And they should.
Okay.
In many ways. And
so going back to the example though, so this guy, human trafficking, he was caught in the act. Why isn't he in custody is what my question is.
Well, he went to prison.
So he went to prison. He served a sentence.
He was in prison for about 3 years.
So he was in prison for 3 years. He served a sentence and they deemed him rehabilitated, or at least he served his time for the crime that he committed, and they let him out.
Right.
And then he was, by order of the court, was he not allowed to be in an area? Or he can go wherever he wants now?
If he was in certain other states, he will either have not even been convicted, or he would be in prison for a life sentence, or even at least 20 years. He was walking the streets again after 3 years.
Okay. What's like let's just say Arizona, what's their law on that?
I'm not sure.
New Mexico, do you know that one?
I'm not sure.
Trying to think of like, what are some other examples of other states that do have what you say is different punishments for this? Now, I'm not saying I think there's a lot of different ways of punishment, right? And I'm not the wise guy that should be saying, hey, I think this crime should have this punishment. I just don't know enough about it. But
which is okay.
But the thought, though, that we wouldn't want him in the area, right? I wouldn't want him in the area either. But is that something that is enforceable?
Here's what happened.
Okay.
With that case. Because I saw him, I made some phone calls like to the Homeland guys, like, what happened? Why is he right here? They couldn't get human trafficking charges on him because the prosecutors weren't proficient in that area. So they went toward drug charges, which is, it's okay. I mean, that's their job. Like, they know how to navigate that and get the most conviction they can. We need a
guy like that, though, like now, if you cast him out of the society, right? You cast him into the woods, the darkness of the woods. Like I always try to think about like what was society like when it was just a town? It was just a town. Everybody knew everybody, and this thing had happened, right?
Yeah.
And so, what would they do? Would they like shun them? Right? You were shunned. You were no longer ever allowed to come here. That's how Australia started to build its empire, right? That became in Australia because the British used to send criminals to Australia. That was banishing them. And then they just go live on that island, right? Yeah. So like with a guy like this, knowing that he's here, now we have situational surveillance. Now we can at least surveil him. Now we know exactly what he's doing all the time. With different processes. You know what I mean?
Here's what you're saying is actually the epitome of what's happening.
Okay. Yeah.
Our criminal justice process is a direct representation of who our public leadership is.
Okay, cool. That's good. That's a good statement. That makes sense to me.
And if the citizens recognize that there is a problem and they're saying, we want this stopped, we can't have this happening. I can't have a known trafficker that is just hanging out in an area where my children, we have a certain quality of life that we want to maintain.
True.
In our area. This person, I'm not talking about his like salvation with God and things like that. That kind of thing is between him and
his beliefs.
This is a public violator.
He probably doesn't have Jesus, truthfully, because you wouldn't be a public violator. Right?
Maybe
if you knew Jesus,
doesn't.
if Jesus called him, he would not be that person. I promise you that. I promise that. If Jesus actually called him, he would not be that person. I promise. Those people are not followers of Jesus.
It's a bold promise. I've confronted guys, been looked in their eyes, smelt their bad breath, seen their alcohol drenched carpets, and I've seen that it's almost like their soul is already gone. Eyes are black.
Yeah,
that's this guy.
Yeah.
I've also had, so coming back to what you're talking about, I've also had traffickers that I believe were in that condition at one point that have completely repented of what they did. And they came to me and told me how to be more effective at what I do. I've also had traffickers, a slave master in a foreign country, when he realized what was going to happen with the children we were clearing out of his slavery, he said, "Can you take me to school?" This was a man that was a slave and grew up to become a slave master.
Yeah.
So with that, I am not passing judgment that this guy needs to be eliminated.
Right.
I'm saying, based on our laws, we have laws in place that can keep people like that out of our community. I'm not talking about the vagrant walking around. I'm talking about a known criminal.
A wolf. A legitimate wolf. Yeah.
And if you were there when I had my first interaction with this guy, you would turn and walk the other way if you saw him on the street.
Yeah.
And but my point of that is our DAs, our prosecutors, they're just like other people. They're highly talented at what they do, but they're going to need to answer to their bosses, and they need to produce work. They need to produce not just prosecutions. They need to actually produce convictions. And for them, they know the drug trade. They know how to get the convictions there, and they know how to get their job done. And they're doing I believe they're doing a good job in that area.
Yeah.
But the drug charges don't tend to carry the same impact and conviction as human trafficking.
Yeah.
And that's what I would like to see. I would like to see our criminal procedure, our criminal justice professionals, those that are focusing on the convictions. I would like to see them focus less on the drug charge and get more creative at getting to conviction, because most of the time they don't have a witness.
Yeah.
Because the witness, by some kind of force, fraud, coercion, won't testify.
There's fear. There's so much fear in this, and I appreciate you bringing this up, because it's not something that it reflected in the questionnaire. This public safety was truthfully not one of the ones where I'm like, this is a big one, right? Because I feel so safe when I'm walking around, my life, if I put my blinders on, which we all tend to do, or a lot of us tend to do, I have such a first world problem with that. I don't tend to think about these important things. So I really appreciate you bringing this up and making this an important thing. And I want to say good luck. I appreciate the time you're spending this. This is going to be a harder thing than I think most people realize. Probably. Do you feel like you're ready to go though? You're psyched about this, man. It seems like it.
Oh yeah, I'm all in.
Okay, cool, dude.
And it's something that when I tackle a mission, I tackle a mission. Yeah. And here we go.
Here we go, man. Well, hey, good luck, and we'll keep talking. But it was nice meeting you, man.
Thanks,
we'll see
Robert. I appreciate you.